Two people retire on the same day, same age, same savings account balance, same neighborhood. One of them runs out of money at 79. The other still has money growing at 91. Nobody stole from the first person. Nobody gave the second person anything extra. The difference was not a stock pick, not a lucky inheritance, and not a financial advisor with a magic formula. The difference was something most retirement planning guides never talk about. It was comfort, specifically. The kind of comfort that feels like safety, but is quietly destroying your financial future one relaxed decision at a time. This video is not about saving more, picking better funds, or maximizing Social Security. There are thousands of videos about those things. This is about something different. What actually happens to people psychologically once they stop working, and why that shift becomes one of the most expensive transitions of their entire life. This video is about a trap, one that is invisible because it does not feel like a trap. It feels like peace. It feels like reward. And because it feels so earned, so deserved, you never question it. That is exactly why it costs so many people everything they built. Your entire working life, you are conditioned by necessity. You perform, you produce, money flows. The structure is built in, the discipline is built in. But here is the truth most people never see. That discipline was never really yours. It belonged to the structure. And when retirement arrives, the structure disappears entirely. The feedback loops go quiet. The accountability fades. And your brain does what brains do. It relaxes. That relaxation is not just a feeling. It is a full shift in how you make decisions, spend money, and think about the future. That shift is the comfort trap. Let us go deeper into how the comfort trap actually operates inside a person's financial life. There are 4 distinct layers to this, and each layer compounds on the one before it. The first layer is what behavioral economists call the relaxation of vigilance. When you are working, you have an automatic awareness of money. You know roughly what comes in, you feel the pressure of what goes out, and you carry an ambient tension about the future. That tension is not comfortable, but it is protective. It keeps you watching. It keeps you slightly on guard. In retirement, that tension dissolves, and the problem is that financial threats do not dissolve with it. They actually increase. You are now spending from a fixed pool. Inflation is still running, healthcare costs are rising, and the market is volatile. The risks are higher, but your vigilance is lower. That gap between rising risk and falling vigilance is where the comfort trap begins to do its real damage. The second layer is something called lifestyle normalization. This is the process by which your spending gradually becomes your identity rather than your budget. In the first few months of retirement, people often feel a sense of joyful liberation. They take a trip they always wanted to take. They eat at restaurants more. They spend a little more on the grandchildren. They update the kitchen they ignored for 20 years, and every one of those decisions feels completely reasonable, because it is. In isolation, each one is fine, but the brain begins to normalize each new level of spending as the new baseline. The trip becomes an annual expectation, the restaurant becomes a weekly habit, the gifts become an emotional commitment, and the kitchen becomes the mental template for what the house should feel like. None of this feels like overspending. All of it is. The third layer is what I call the false abundance illusion. When you look at a retirement account with $400,000 or $500,000 or $600,000 in it, your brain does not naturally calculate what that means over 20 or 30 years of inflation. Adjusted spending. What it does is compare that number to any number you have ever held in your life. And for most people, that retirement balance is the largest sum of money they have ever personally controlled. So it feels like a lot. It triggers a psychological abundance cue that is almost impossible to override with rational thinking. You know intellectually that the money has to last, but you feel like it is infinite. And the emotional feeling wins almost every time, especially when your daily life is designed to be comfortable and low stress. The fourth layer is the gradual withdrawal of future orientation. This is perhaps the most psychologically destructive layer of all. Young and middle-aged people think constantly about the future because the future feels real and close. It is the place where their goals live. But in retirement, the future begins to feel abstract in a different way. There is a subtle and deeply human tendency to think about time horizons differently when you are older. You stop planning in decades. You start living in seasons. And financial discipline requires thinking in decades. It requires feeling the weight of a decision made today on a life that continues 15 or 20 years from now. When that future orientation fades, the decisions begin to shrink. And shrinking decisions mean shrinking protection. Micro examples. Consider what this looks like in real everyday behavior. Not dramatic financial disasters, just quiet, ordinary decisions. Someone retires and starts spending an extra $300 a month on things that feel completely reasonable. Slightly better groceries, a streaming service or two more. Dining out, a gym membership they use occasionally. $300 a month is $3,600 a year. over 20 years, with the compounding effect of that money not growing, that quiet, comfortable habit represents somewhere between $70,000 and $90,000 in lost future value for something that never once felt like a financial mistake. Or think about this. A retired couple decides to help their adult child with a down payment on a house. $40,000, not a loan, a gift. Because they can. Because they want to. Because it feels like the right use of money at this stage of life. And in the moment, it absolutely feels right. But that $40,000, if left in a moderately invested retirement account for 10 more years, would likely grow to somewhere between $65,000 and $80,000. The gift cost them the present amount. And the invisible cost was the future amount. The child gets a house. The parents get a decade of reduced financial security. And they never once connect those two events. Or think about a person who stops tracking their spending in retirement because, and they often say this exact thing, I have enough, I don't need to be so strict anymore. This person does not make any individual catastrophic decision. They just stop watching. And without watching, spending has a natural tendency to expand. Not because the person is irresponsible, but because human beings are not naturally calibrated to hold spending patterns steady without external structure. The structure was the job. The job is gone, and the spending quietly expands into the space that the discipline used to occupy. None of these people feel like they are making mistakes. That is the entire point of the comfort trap. It does not announce itself. It arrives disguised as a reward. Rules and principles. Now let us talk about what the alternative looks like. Not in theory, but in the form of clear, practical principles that protect you from the comfort trap without turning retirement into something joyless or paranoid. The first principle is this: treat retirement as a second financial life, not a financial finish line. Most people prepare for retirement as though it is the end of the financial game. It is not. It is the beginning of a completely different game, one with different rules, different risks, and different disciplines. The money behavior that served you during accumulation will not automatically serve you during distribution. You need to consciously build a new framework for how you relate to money, not assume the old one carries over. The second principle is build structure back in artificially. Since the job no longer provides the discipline scaffolding, you have to create it yourself. This means having a written budget, not as a punishment, but as a map. It means reviewing your spending monthly, not annually. It means having regular conversations about money with a spouse, a financial advisor, or even just a trusted friend. The structure needs to be real and recurring, or it will not hold. The third principle is create a comfort ceiling for your lifestyle spending. This is a defined upper limit for what you allow your comfortable daily spending to become. Not a minimum. You're not trying to be frugal for its own sake. A ceiling. A point beyond which you do not allow your normalized spending to rise, regardless of how natural or deserved the next expense feels. The ceiling is not about deprivation. It is about preventing lifestyle normalization from quietly running the show. The fourth principle is separate emotional spending from financial decisions. Retirement tea is full of emotionally charged spending moments. Grandchildren, family support, charitable impulses, experiences you want to have while you are still healthy. These are all legitimate, but they need to come from a designated allocation, not from the main body of your retirement funds. Create a separate emotional spending category with a fixed annual budget. When it is gone for that year. This protects your core savings from the very real and very human impulse to spend generously in ways that feel right in the moment. The fifth principle is track net worth quarterly, not just account balances. Most retirees monitor their account balance. They check to see if the number went up or down. But the more important number is net worth over time, which accounts for spending, inflation, healthcare costs, and market performance together. Looking at this number quarterly creates the kind of reality check that prevents the false abundance illusion from taking hold. When you can see the actual trajectory of your financial life across multiple quarters, comfort cannot hide behind a large-looking balance. The sixth principle is inflation is not a background detail. It is a primary threat. In retirement, inflation is arguably the most dangerous risk most people face because it erodes purchasing power silently and continuously. At 4% annual inflation, the money you have today will only buy half as much in roughly 18 years. If you are spending comfortably in the first decade and not accounting for this erosion, you are not being comfortable. You are being exposed. Every retirement spending plan needs an inflation adjustment built in, not as an afterthought, but as a core feature of how the plan works. The seventh principle is, do not gift from principle. If you want to be generous, and you should be if it brings you joy, gift only from income or from a clearly designated and limited pool. Giving from the principle of your retirement savings is one of the fastest and least visible ways that retirement accounts deplete ahead of schedule. The generosity is real. The financial impact is also real. Both can be true simultaneously. The eighth principle is review your fixed costs every single year. In retirement, fixed costs are the silent killers. A subscription you signed up for and forgot. An insurance policy that auto-renewed at a higher rate. A membership that made sense 3 years ago and no longer does. Because retired people are not as attuned to cash flow as working people, these fixed costs tend to accumulate quietly and go unchallenged for years. A single annual audit of every recurring expense is one of the simplest and highest return financial habits a retiree can build. The ninth principle is keep some form of productive engagement, even if it pays very little. This is not about needing the money. It is about what productive engagement does to your financial psychology. People who maintain some form of economic participation in retirement, consulting, part-time work, a small business, monetized skills, tend to stay financially sharper, spend more consciously, and make better long-term decisions. The reason is simple. Production reminds you of the value of money in a way that pure consumption cannot. You do not have to earn much, but earning something changes how you think. The 10th principle is plan explicitly for the years between 75 and 90. Most retirement planning focuses heavily on the first 10 years of retirement because those are the years people can most clearly visualize. But the financial risks that destroy people most completely tend to arrive in the back half of retirement. Healthcare costs, cognitive decline, the need for assisted living, the gradual loss of ability to manage finances actively. Planning explicitly for those years, rather than vaguely hoping the money will be there, is the difference between retiring and retiring safely. Numbers and reality? Check. Let us talk about some numbers, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop and look at what the actual math is saying. The average American retirees today spend roughly $240,000 to $180,000 on out-of-pocket healthcare costs over the course of their retirement. That number is not covered by Medicare. It is not optional. It is a hard structural cost that most people dramatically underestimate when they are projecting what their retirement savings need to handle. If you retire at 65 and live to 87, which is entirely plausible given current life expectancy trends, you will need your savings to support you for 22 years. At a 4% annual withdrawal rate, which has historically been considered relatively safe, a $1 million portfolio generates $40,000 per year. If your Social Security covers 50 to 60% of your living costs, that math can work. If you have allowed your comfortable lifestyle to push spending significantly above what Social Security covers, the math begins to fail. Slowly at first, then suddenly. Here's a number that very few people ever sit with long enough to feel. If a retiree with $700,000 in savings allows their real spending to run 10% above their sustainable withdrawal rate, not dramatically above, just 10%, they will likely exhaust their savings somewhere between 4 and 7 years earlier than their plan projected. That is not a minor adjustment to their plan. That is 4 to 7 fewer years of financial security. For a person who retires at 65, that difference could mean running out of money at 82 instead of 87. And at 82, re-entering the workforce is not a realistic option for most people. The other number worth understanding is the hidden cost of the comfort mentality itself, the cost of not doing things. When a retiree chooses not to consult a financial advisor because they feel they have enough, not to track spending because it feels unnecessary, not to review their plan because everything seems fine, each of those non-decisions carries an opportunity cost. Financial plans that are never reviewed do not simply stay on track. They drift. And drift, compounded over 15 years, is rarely in a favorable direction. Future projection. Close your eyes for a moment, figuratively, and think about what the next 15 years of your financial life actually look like on their current trajectory. If you are allowing comfort to govern your retirement, here's what that future looks like in practice. By year 5 of retirement, your spending baseline has crept up in ways that feel natural. By year 8 or 9, a healthcare event, minor or major, creates an unexpected draw on your savings. By year 12, inflation has meaningfully eroded the purchasing power of your withdrawals, but your spending expectations have stayed the same or grown. So the gap between what you need and what your money can produce has widened quietly for over a decade. By year 15, the number in your account has a size that concerns you in a way it did not before. And the options that were available to you at 68, adjust, rebalance, work a little, restructure, are significantly fewer at 80. You are not in crisis, perhaps, but you are in constraint. And constraint at 80 looks and feels very different than constraint at 45. There is no career pivot. There is no next promotion. There is no second chance at the compounding years. The window that was open has closed. Now hold the alternative picture. You enter retirement with a plan that treats comfort as something you earn within boundaries, Not something you consume without limit. You create structure artificially because you understand that the structure that was keeping you financially safe just disappeared with your last paycheck. You review your spending every month, not obsessively, but honestly. You keep your lifestyle normalized at a level that is genuinely comfortable but not constantly expanding. You understand healthcare as a core budget category, not an emergency category. You stay engaged in some small way with productive work, not because you have to, but because you know what it does to your thinking. By year 5, your account trajectory is tracking closely with your original plan. By year 10, you have navigated 1 or 2 market corrections without having to dramatically alter your lifestyle because your plan anticipated volatility rather than assuming smooth sailing. By year 15, you still have options. You can be generous with your children. You can take the trip you want to take. You can handle a medical event without it becoming a financial catastrophe. You're not rich in some new way you were. Not before. You simply still have what you built. And that, in the back half of retirement, is everything. The difference between these two futures is not a different starting point. It is a different understanding of what comfort actually costs. Comfort is not the enemy of retirement. It is the reward. But there is a difference between feeling financially secure and actually being secure. The comfort trap begins when people stop paying attention because they believe they have finally earned the right to relax. Slowly, spending, gifts, habits, and neglect can erode the security they worked decades to build. Retirement does not mean financial responsibility ends. It means managing your resources differently. True financial security is not a destination. It is something you continue protecting. The goal is not to choose between comfort and sacrifice, but to build a retirement where comfort never comes at the cost of your future choices.